Hey, good morning, Uncle Lou here. Yep, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, live with you on YouTube. Beep, beep, boop, doo. Yeah, video coming here in just a second, but real quick, you remember last week I posted that link to a Facebook group, 100% True SEC fans, and told you to join up if you like to argue about college football with fans of a bunch of other teams and stuff like that. Here's the picture of the group if you want to look for it again and join up. It's a great group. Here's the picture, 100% True SEC fans. A lot of y'all joined. Thank you. I hope you're having a good time in there. What I want to do today is mention another group. Now, this group is a Georgia-only group. If you're familiar with these football Facebook groups, there's two types of groups that float around. There's single-team groups, fan groups, and every team has them. Georgia's got a bunch of them, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee. Every team's got these fan groups on Facebook. And then you have the mixed groups where you have teams of multiple fans and people just get in there and trash talk each other all day long. Both groups are fun in their own way. The trash talk groups aren't for everybody, though. I understand that. That's why these single team groups exist. I'm going to leave a link today in the description to a UGA only group. I'm an admin in that group. There's 4 or 5 of us that run that group, all good guys. And if you're a Georgia fan and you're looking for a group on Facebook to talk Georgia football, discuss Georgia football or whatever, this is the group to join. And I'll say the same disclaimer I said about the trash talk groups, because I know a ton of people in all these different groups. I'm not slighting any group, okay? I'm in a bunch of these groups. And so just like with this Smack group I told you to join 100%, I said, get you in there. If you like it, I'll add you to some other ones. I'm not putting down any of those other groups. All the groups are good in some way. All the groups are bad in some way. They're all a little bit different in some way, but they're all basically the same at the same time, okay? Same thing with the UGA groups. I'm not going to leave a link to 45 UGA groups down in the description. I'm going to leave a link to one group that I admin in, that I help run, okay? If you want to join it, talk UGA football, and you're a Georgia fan, and you have a Facebook page, obviously, click the link in the description below, and I'll make sure you get approved to join the group. The Georgia group that I run is not a rainbows, unicorns, and lollipops group. There are some out there that are like that just post UGA memes all day long and pictures of Vince Dooley and stuff like that. Those groups are fine. The group that I run, as you might imagine, is a pretty opinionated group. So if it hurts your feelings to hear a Georgia fan say that the offensive line played like crap yesterday or Saturday or whatever, this isn't the group for you, because you will hear that in there. Now, there's plenty of people in there that I mean, we keep it real in there is what I'm telling you. Okay. Anyway, it's a great group. Click the link, join up. Here's the playoff video. Good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yep, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live for you on YouTube today. Yep, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. We're going to talk about playoff scenarios today. Yeah, Georgia got destroyed by Auburn. Auburn dominated us from start to finish on that game. They were better offensively, defensively. They were better on special teams. They had more discipline. We had penalties out to yin-yang. Auburn was the better team. They destroyed us. We looked unprepared and weren't ready for that game. There's really nothing else to say about it. So hats off to the barn. You guys took it to us. Maybe we'll get to see you again in Atlanta. Maybe not. Depends on what happens in the Iron Bowl. Plenty on that next week. But today I want to talk about playoff scenarios. Listen. One other thing on Georgia here, real quick, because the comments from Saturday after the game, all day yesterday, this morning, are hilarious. Please keep them coming. I'm trying to reply to as many of them as I can, but there's just too many of them. But they're hilarious. Listen, we're 9-1, okay? 9-1, and we got a beating on Saturday, no doubt about it. But we're 9-1. We already won the East. We're going to beat Kentucky and Georgia Tech. I promise you that. We're going to finish 11-1, and we're going to roll the dice in Atlanta. If you go back to the beginning of the year and you watch every Georgia preview video I made, which was 2 or 3, I did an SEC East preview, a Georgia preview. I mentioned this in a lot of the preseason videos. Georgia's goals and expectations this year were to win the East and roll the dice in Atlanta. Here we are, going into the second week of November. Georgia has locked up the East, and we have a chance to roll the dice in Atlanta. There is nothing that can happen the rest of this year that is going to end in disappointment for UGA in terms of preseason expectations. Now, yeah, obviously as the season went along, UGA's expectations increased. We're blowing out teams. Yes, I know they were bad teams, but there's lots of teams that not only don't blow out bad teams, they lose to bad teams. And we're going to talk about some of those when I start talking about the playoff here. So point is, we're 9-1, won the East. We'll see what happens in Atlanta, depending on who we play when we get there. But playoff scenarios, I'm going to go through conference by conference. So let's start with the Big 12, all right? It's my opinion that there's only one team left in the Big 12 that has a chance to make the playoff, and that team is Oklahoma. They're sitting at one loss, which is to Iowa State. That loss does not look nearly as bad now as it did when it happened. Iowa State beat Oklahoma around the middle of the season, a little before. People scratched their head, couldn't understand it. Since then, Iowa State has beat some other pretty good teams, including, TCU. Anyway, Iowa State not nearly as bad as most people thought they were when they beat that Oklahoma team. So that loss doesn't look so bad now. They're sitting at one loss. Not a very good loss, but still, just look at other people's records. They have one loss. They're in the driver's seat for the college football playoff as far as Big 12 teams go. They play, I think, Kansas this week. That's a guaranteed win. They're one of the worst teams in the Power 5. They finish up with West Virginia. West Virginia won't be a pushover, but Oklahoma should be able to handle West Virginia. West Virginia has 2 conference losses in the Big 12. Oklahoma has 1. So whoever wins that West Virginia-Oklahoma game will be the winner of the Big 12 regular season title. They do have a title game this year. It works different than other conferences because there aren't 2 divisions in the Big 12. There's only 1. Okay, so what they do is they take the top 2 teams after the regular season and they make them play again in the title game because they do round robin in the Big 12. Every team plays every other team. So you're going to see a rematch of something in the Big 12 title game. My guess right now is that Oklahoma wins their next 2 games, finishes first in the Big 10, and play either TCU or Oklahoma State. TCU and Oklahoma State are tied right now with 2 conference losses. So my guess would be Oklahoma plays one of those 2 teams. If Oklahoma can win that game, they're in the college football playoff. If Oklahoma loses either before that game or they lose that game, they're out and the entire Big 12 is out. That's the way I see it. So Big 12, one possibility, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma controls its own destiny. I don't see any way, if Oklahoma wins out, that they do not make the playoff. All right, so that's one team that can get in. All they got to do is win their next 3 games, okay? Pac-12. Nobody. There's no one in the Pac-12 is making the playoffs. It's just not happening. Washington and Southern Cal both sitting at 2 losses. Neither one of them have a really good win. Pac-12 overall just hasn't been that impressive this year. Some people want to argue that the Pac-12 is good top to bottom, so the teams are beating each other up type of thing. I understand that to a certain degree, even if I were to agree that that's true. Even though the SEC is down right now, I don't think anybody would argue that it's not. Obviously, the SEC is down right now. There was an 8 or 9 year period where the SEC was the best in college football without debate. From around 2007 and 8 until, what do you want to say, 2013, 2014, whatever. Anyway, we still managed to have one team every year either run the table or get through with one loss to go ahead and win the title or have a shot at it. What did we win? 6 titles in a row, and then Auburn lost to Florida State in 2013, breaking the streak or whatever. So just because your conference is good top to bottom is really not an excuse to say, well, even though we have a bunch of 2-loss teams, one of them still deserves a shot at the playoff. No, Pac-12 is out. Washington lost a head-scratching game at Arizona State where they just couldn't score. And then they lost to Stanford last week, who only has one good player, Bryce Love. Bryce Love was at about 50% that game, hobbling around, and Washington lost. That, in my opinion, was their last hope for a playoff team. So I think the Pac-12 is out. I don't think there's any possible way a Pac-12 team gets in. ACC. ACC has 2 teams right now that control their own destiny and their own path to the playoff. You know who they are. Clemson and Miami. Miami, no losses. Clemson, 1 loss. Miami is probably the biggest surprise in college football this year. Almost everybody thought they would be improved from last year, which last year wasn't a bad year. They made and they won a bowl game last year for the first time in like 10 years last year. So they had some expectations going into the year. I did not think Miami would even finish as a top 15 team. Miami and Texas are probably the two teams that I've been the most wrong on this year. Yeah, probably Miami for sure, and probably Texas. I was for the opposite reason. I was high on Texas in the preseason. They turned out to be kind of a dud. Maybe a year away from making a run at the Big 12 title, but not this year like I thought it would be. But Miami is the real deal, and I really don't want to hear a bunch of people in the comment section telling me I'm stupid for not believing in Miami all year, or that it's only because I hate Mark Richt. Because I know several Miami fans in real life, and a bunch on the internet that I can talk actual football with, and nobody was impressed with Miami's miracle win against Georgia Tech, their miracle win against a one-win North Carolina team. They weren't blowing people out. I mean, that was the biggest difference you saw in the rankings between where Georgia was ranked and where Miami was ranked. Not in my poll, any poll you looked at. They were both undefeated, both were winning games. Why was one ranked so much higher than the other? Well, one was blowing teams out. Yes, I know they were bad teams that Georgia was blowing out. Miami, on the other hand, was barely beating bad teams. North Carolina, bad team. Georgia Tech, bad team. Florida State, bad team. Miami was barely winning these games. Point is, though, they won them. And now, when it matters most, they're hitting their stride. They completely controlled the game against Virginia Tech 2 weeks ago in a 28-10 win. And then they absolutely dismantled Notre Dame, which no one saw coming. Not even Miami fans. Now, I know Miami fans thought they were going to win that game, and I don't blame you for thinking you were going to win that game. You were on a roll. You were undefeated. You were at home. I don't blame you for thinking that. But no Miami fan, before that game kicked off on Saturday, would have given Notre Dame 30 points in a bet. You wouldn't have done it. So Miami has far and away exceeded everyone's expectations this year. So miss me with the whole I'm stupid thing, because I didn't know Miami was going to be a top 4 team this year. No one knew, including Miami fans in the offseason. So there you go. There's my crow or whatever for being wrong on Miami all year. They look legitimate to me. They'll probably be in the top 4 this week when the poll comes out, without question. So Miami and Clemson, the only 2 teams, in my opinion, in the ACC with a chance to make a run at the title. They both have to win out, I think. Again, I don't think either one of those 2 teams can afford a loss. Unfortunately for Miami, even though they're undefeated, if they lose a game, it's going to be to a 1-loss Clemson in the ACC title game. And they're not putting both of those teams in. So even though those teams would finish with the same record and only 1 loss, they would put Clemson in, obviously, ahead of Miami. I don't think both those teams get in under any scenario. I think whichever team wins that title game, I don't see Clemson or Miami, either one, losing before then. So whoever wins that game is in. So you've got Oklahoma, if they win out, they're in. No one from the Pac-12. And then either Clemson or Miami is getting in, whoever wins that ACC title game. So that's 2 possibilities. Oklahoma, Miami, Clemson, right? Well, who else is getting in? Well, you look at the Big Ten. Wisconsin is undefeated. They play Michigan, and then the Big 12 title game. If Michigan wins out, they're definitely in. So Michigan controls their own destiny. They win out, they're in, period. I don't think another Big Ten team is getting in. Some people are trying to make a case for Ohio State. I don't see it happening. You have 2 losses. Neither was close. And I know you can't use last year to look at this year. I just have a hard time seeing the committee putting a 2-loss Ohio State team into the playoff when they went out on a limb last year to put Ohio State in, and they got embarrassed. They got shut out in the first round of the playoffs. So you can find plenty of internet articles that will tell you this is what has to happen for Ohio State to make the playoff. Short of a complete catastrophe in the top 5 in the next week or two, I don't see it happening. I think it's Wisconsin or nobody out of the Big Ten. That leaves the SEC. Yeah, the SEC, like I said at the beginning, I know, look, Georgia got ran over. I get it. They got blown out. This isn't, I'm not predicting who's winning games here. I'm telling you the math of the situation. This is who has chances. Obviously, Alabama, they're undefeated, right? They have a chance. They play a nobody this week. And then the Iron Bowl. Same for Auburn, a nobody, and the Iron Bowl. The winner of the Iron Bowl will win the West and play Georgia in Atlanta. If Georgia wins its next 2 games, and the winner of the Iron Bowl doesn't lose this week, which they're not, in my opinion, the winner of the SEC championship game will be in the playoff. So either Auburn or Alabama or UJ, whoever wins that game. Even though UJ got beat by 30 points, whatever it was, 40-17, 23 points. If Georgia beats Kentucky, if Georgia beats Georgia Tech, and if Georgia wins the SEC championship game, which after the way we played on Saturday would be a huge long shot, Georgia would get in. Maybe the number 4 seed, but they would get in. If Auburn beats their next two games, wins the Iron Bowl, and then beats Georgia in the SEC title game, I think Auburn will get in with 2 losses. They will have beat Georgia, who was the number 1 team, will still be a top 10 team. They will have beat Alabama, who's now going to be the number 1 team, and even if loses to Auburn, will still be a top 10 team. So they will have 2 wins in the last 3 weeks of the season over top 10 teams, with a chance to beat another top 10 team, UGA, again, in the SEC championship game. So I think Auburn would get in that scenario, mainly because the Pac-12 has eliminated itself and Notre Dame has eliminated itself. A 1-loss Pac-12 champion would probably get in over a 2-loss Auburn SEC champion this year, but there's not one. A 1-loss Notre Dame would probably get in over a 2-loss Auburn SEC champion, but Notre Dame's eliminated. Obviously, Alabama, if they win out, they're in. If you're looking for any type of scenario where a team can lose and get in, I believe Alabama is the only team left in America that can lose one of its remaining games and still possibly get in. And I'll give you a couple of examples here. Let's say Alabama loses the Iron Bowl by a field goal. Okay? They're sitting at 11-1. Well, no matter who wins the SEC championship game, whether it's Georgia or Auburn, 2 SEC teams could then get into the playoff. Alabama and the winner of the SEC championship game. Now, for that to happen, I think Wisconsin would have to lose the Big Ten title game, if that makes sense. Okay? Let's assume Miami wins out and beats Clemson. Miami's in. Let's assume Oklahoma wins out and wins the Big 12 title game. Oklahoma's in. That's Clemson and Oklahoma. That would leave you 2 spots left. The winner of the SEC title game is in. That's your 3rd spot. The 4th spot is going to go to either Wisconsin or a 1-loss Alabama. That's my opinion on how this thing is going to shake out in the end. I'm not predicting these games at this point, so either Clemson or Miami is getting 1 spot. I think Oklahoma runs the table and gets another spot. I think the winner of the SEC championship game gets a spot. And then that 4th spot is going to be either an undefeated Wisconsin or a 1-loss Alabama. So how many teams is that total with a chance to get in? Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Miami, Clemson, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia. Is that 7 teams? Oklahoma and Wisconsin, that's 2. 3 from the SEC is 5. Clemson or Miami is 6 or 7. 7 teams left with a chance to make the Final Four. So, Auburn fans, Alabama fans, Oklahoma fans, Clemson fans, Wisconsin fans, Miami, Clemson, Auburn, Alabama, Oklahoma, Wisconsin. Any of those fans out there watching, feel free to rag Uncle Lou about that skull dragging we took at Auburn last week. If you're a fan of any other team, and there's 123 other teams right now that don't have a chance the second week in November to make the college football playoff. If you're a fan of any of those other 123 teams, sit down and shut the hell up. Because you'd trade places with UGA in a heartbeat. Have a good morning.